Hello, good morning everyone. Today we are starting the new part of the course, Data Science with Python. This following lecture will be on probability and statistics, and we are starting a new part of the course, which is on probability and statistics for business and data science. Right. So this is the first lecture. I welcome all of you, and let's get started. In this, we'll be talking about, we'll be introducing a lot of different topics, and in probability and statistics. And first, let's start with the definition of statistics. So, statistics is the mathematical science behind problem. What can I know about a population if I'm unable to reach every member? Statistics help us to understand the complete population, or to make a judgment, or make an inference, or make help us to understand the complete population based on a small sample. Okay, so suppose we want to make a judgment, or we want to define the performance of all the students of a school, like whether they are good students, bad students, or poor students, right? So we can make this judgment. One way is to go and talk to all the students of the school, or you can take just a sample. Okay, maybe like three students from every class, and based on their performance, you can tell. Okay, yes. We have tested, or we analyze the results of three students of every class, and this is what we found. So this means that the performance of all the students in the school is good, poor, or bad. Okay, so statistics provides us with the tools and mathematical procedures that can be employed, or that can be used to make decisions, or to make inferences about a population, or about a larger group based on the data observed from a smaller group. Okay, so if we could measure the height of every resident of Australia, then we could make a statement about the average height of Australians at the time we took our measurement. Okay, so suppose we want to find the average height of citizens of our country. Okay, suppose I want to make a conclusion. Okay, so what is the average height of a man living in India? Right. So the correct or the absolute way of doing this would be to measure the height of each and every individual living in our country, India. Like there are like 130 crores of us, right? So, but this is not feasible. You cannot go and measure the height of each and every person living in our country, right? So what we do is we take a sample, or we take a smaller portion of all the humans, measure their height, and based on the heights of those measured group, we make a conclusion about the heights of all the individual living in our country. Okay, so this smaller group that we use to generalize the height of all the persons living in our country is called a random sampling. Okay, so we cannot measure the height of all the people living in our country, or living in a country. So we take a small sample. Suppose we say we take 10 or 20 individuals, 30 individuals from each and every state, and we measure their heights, and based on their height measurements, we can generalize that. Okay, so the height of any individual living in India is going to be 5.5 feet, or 5 feet 10 inches, based on that. So we cannot go about measuring all the individuals, or all the persons living in a country, because that is very much time consuming. That is like almost useless, right? It will take a lot of resources. So, but we still want to know what is the average height of any person living in our country. So we use random sampling. So instead of measuring all of the population, we just take a sample, right? Suppose you go out to buy fruits, right? You go out to buy apples. So if you are buying 5 or 10 kilos, you do not check each and every individual apple. Okay, you check few of them, like two three apples. You check, if you find the quality is good, then you can ask the shopkeeper to give you 5 or 10 kgs, whatever is your requirement, right? Suppose you went out to buy peanuts, right? So peanuts are like, if you buy even half kg or 1 kg, the number of individual peanuts is going to be very large, right? So you cannot check each and every peanut what the quality, or what is the quality, whether it is good or not. So you just take a few samples, like you take 4 or 5 peanuts, you open them, you taste them, and if you feel that they are good, you take the whole lot. Okay, so this is what. So like, what is the best way of doing this kind of decision making based on a smaller population or a smaller sample, is a part of statistics. Okay, so statistics let us know, or let us allow us to make a decision about a whole population. Population is a bigger thing, based on a smaller sample which is taken from the population. Okay, so based on those few apples, I can make a judgment about all of, like, what is the quality of apples that particular shopkeeper is selling. Okay, and this thing is called random sampling, right? So before checking those few 2 3 apples which are which the shopkeeper is selling, you don't apply any algorithm. Okay, you just pick randomly, okay, from one from here, one from there, you take them, you observe their color, observe their shape, maybe you can smell them, and if you feel it is they are good, you go ahead and buy those 5 or 10 kgs of apples. If you are buying peanuts, so you randomly take from the whole box or from the whole bag, you take few 5 or 6 peanuts randomly, you open them and eat them to get a taste of how, to judge what is the quality, right? This is called random sampling. So, if we take a reasonably sized random sample of Australians and measure their heights, we can form a statistical inference about the population of Australia. Okay, so it's just like we did, if we take a reasonably sized random sample. Okay, so reasonably sized is random sample. So like, suppose we want to measure the heights of whole of all the citizens of India, then we cannot go and measure the height of each and every individual. We can just take a sample. So any samples, like maybe 50 people from every state, or like 3 people from every district of the country, right? So this we can do, and we can make a judgment, or we can make a statistical inference, or whatever what this is the actual term, statistical inference. Statistical means like it derived using statistics, and inference means some decision, some conclusion that we are able to make, right? If you eat that one apple and it is you eat that one peanut and it does not taste good, you make an inference. So there is a, okay, maybe this shopkeeper is selling all the foul peanuts, the peanuts are not good, so you don't buy from them. Okay, so that this is what inference is called. So right, if you take a sample of all the Australians and measure their heights, then you can make a statistical inference about the population of Australia. This is what statistics is. And probability help us to know how sure we are of our conclusions. How sure we are of our conclusions, right? So after an exam, you go back to your home. Your parents ask, "How was your exam? How did you perform in the exam?" You say, "Okay, fine. It was I performed good." Okay, like that. So all these are not they are not telling actually what how did you perform. Okay, so some guy who is like a constantly very high top performer, and if he says, okay, it was okay, only the exam went fine, then maybe he may score about around 80 or 90, because for him that is okay, and scoring 90 100 is like the best for him, right? If you could talk to an average guy, like who scores marks between 50 to 80, for him, okayish, if he says my exam went okay and the exam went fine, okay, normal only, if he answers in this way, then he may score around 60 or like 60 marks or 60 65, right? So there is no proper number that can be associated with how much sure you are, right? So once you say, okay, like some of our friends do this, so they exactly know how much they did correct and how much they did wrong. So someone says, okay, hi, how was your exam? And your friend says, I'm like 90% sure my exam was really good. So that means around he did pretty well, because he's associated a number with it, right? 90%. And in the TV, in the weather forecast, in the news, we see that tomorrow there is 70% chances of getting a rain, 90% chances of it being raining, right? So when we associate a number or any a quantifiable entity with any particular outcome, then we call this probability. So probability means what is the chances of anything happening, okay, or not happening. Right. So next question is, what is data? right? So data is the collected observation we have about something. So data every so like data is just collected observations, right? So you talk to your friends, you hear their voice, they are saying something, it is also data. You watch a movie, you watch news, you watch a video on YouTube, it's a visual data, right? You read something on the book, it's textual data, right? So you hear someone talking, some people talking about something, and you record that in your brain, in your mind. That is all, or what that is also data. So if you are sitting in an exam and your friend makes a gesture, then you very easily understand what he is trying to say. That gesture, that particular pose that your friend is making is also data. So anything, so like we most of the things around us are data in all the different forms, right? So data can be continuous. So what is the stock price? Okay, what are your marks? What is the price of your watch? So this is called continuous data. Continuous means like it is on a scale, right? So the cost can be like 100 rupees, 1000 rupees, 500 rupees, 250 rupees, 10,000 rupees. Okay, it's a continuous thing, price. Or it can be categorical. What car has the best repair history, right? Okay, what is your favorite car? What is your favorite color? What is your favorite fruit? So all these are categorical. So please keep this thing in mind. That data can be continuous, like whether it can be measured on a scale, or categorical, like it has categories: red, blue, brown, orange, mango, grapes, right? Or a car, which car? Yeah, I like Mercedes, I like Audi, I like Maruti, right? Next is why data matters, like because why is data important? So it helps us understand things as they are. Okay, because data helps us to understand the things, or understand a particular behavior. Okay, suppose your friend says, I'll tomorrow at 4 p.m. I'll see you at the football ground, right? But your friend didn't come. Next day you meet your friend, he says, okay, so sorry brother, I got some problem at home, that's why I could not come, but surely this Sunday I'll come at 4 p.m. This Sunday also he did. Your friend did not come up for playing football, and but he made some reason on the very next day. So you have an understanding that this friend of yours will give you a promise but will not turn up to play. Right, and it's because based on his data, because on the past 2 days you saw your friend promised, but he did not come up, he did not show up, but he made a reason, or he made a excuse for not coming. So just like your friend's behavior tells you a lot of things about your friend's character, right? Similarly, data helps us to understand how things actually are. Okay, so if it is raining for the past 3 days, and then the news says it is going to rain tomorrow, then you will be very well prepared. If you have to go out somewhere, then you will be prepared that it is going to rain, so I should carry an umbrella. So data helps us to understand how things are. So what relationships if exist between any two events? So data helps us to understand if there are any relationships that are existing between two events, right? Do people we eat do people who eat an apple a day enjoy few doctor visits than those who don't, right? So there is a saying, an apple a day keeps a doctor away. So like whether it is actually true or not, right? So if you observe some people who are eating apples every day, and you check their medical history, how many times they are visiting the doctor, then you can actually make out whether this saying is true or not, right? Like this, it helps you understand the things as they are. It helps us to predict future behavior to guide business decisions. Okay, so like in our everyday life we are using data to make to understand things, to understand people, to understand situations, to make better decisions. Okay, or to make better understanding about the future, right? So similarly, data is used very significantly in by all the businesses to make future strategies, to make future decisions. Okay, so based on a user's click history, which ad is more likely to bring them to our site, right? If you are using Facebook, you are using uh, Google, you are using Quora, you are visiting a lot of websites, you see a lot of different kind of ads, but there are very few ads which you click, right? So this can so all these events, like which ads you are spending your time on, what kind of videos you are watching on YouTube, they all give these companies, these businesses, us small insights about what kind of a person we are, right? What kind of things we like. Suppose we always, so whenever browsing Facebook, we always watch the ads of shoes or sneakers, right? So that means we are interested in sneakers, so we will be seeing more ads related to shoes, related to sneakers, right? And probably like after like 4 or 5 days or maybe 10 days, eventually I buy a sneaker because I was interested in sneakers. I was watching the ads on Facebook and Google, and eventually I bought one of the sneakers. So all this helps us to predict the future behavior, right? Next thing is visualizing data. Now think of a situation where I give you an Excel sheet like this, right? It contains year, month, and passengers, and there are like this data is about of last 50 years. So you have 50 rows, 50 into 12 rows, right? So you have 6,000 rows, and these columns are there. So you want to study about all this data, all this like 6,000 data points you want to study together, and you are being given this Excel sheet. So based on this, you have to just make out any kind of information that you can, right? So what is the number of passengers, highest number of passengers, lowest number of passengers, most number of passengers, like which month has the most number of passengers traveled, right? This is data from a data set which we have practiced in one of our data science exercises, right? You can watch the channel videos under data visualization in Python. There you will find this, but the same data set, right? So now not much can be gained by reading it. But if I show you this graph, this is the graph of that same data set, then you can actually see, not even by knowing anything, you can see like this part is blue, this part is red. That means this particular data is different from all this rest of the data, right? Now if you like go through it, you can understand this color gives you the number of passengers traveled, right? So the more red the color is, the more number of passengers traveled, and the more blue the color is, the less number of passengers traveled. So that we can easily make out like during the years 1950 to 1955, very less passengers used to travel, around 150 or even less than that. But as we move towards 1959, okay, we see more red color in the graph, and during these particular 2 months, August and July, the color is more red, right? That means a very large number of passengers travel during this particular month. So like with this picture, in just 1 second, any person can make out there is something different, like, so this particular part of data is different from other parts. So like this particular part of region of data is different from all this particular part of the graph, right? So because higher number of passengers traveled during this month and not during this part of the year or this part of the decade. All right, so the graphs uncover two distinct trends: an increase in passengers flying over the years, and a greater number of passengers flying in the summer months, right? So if you like look at, these are the month of June, July, and August, and a lot of passengers are traveling during these months. And as compared, like if you talk about this particular year, 1959, so maximum number of people are traveling in these 2 months, July and August and July. Maybe this is the part of summer vacation. That's why. And if you talk about all the years, the higher number of passengers are traveling if we move towards the right of the graph. Okay, so these things can be easily visualized, or we can find some of these underlying patterns by visualizing data that we cannot do just by looking at a table or an Excel sheet, right? So we have to analyze the visualizations critically, right? So suppose if you look at the left graph at the left, you will see that there is an increasing trend. So this plot is about the number of insurance claims and the age. So if you look at this particular graph, we see that as the age increases, the number of claims also increases. So we can make an inference or conclusion that the more aged people make more claims. Okay, insurance claims, maybe like any health insurance claims, or maybe you can say your car insurance claims, whatever, some insurance, right? So this plot shows an increasing trend. If the age increases, the insurance claims also increases, right? So if you talk, but when you see the complete picture, see the graph here starts from 20, from 20, not from 0. Here also it starts from 20, but not from 0. So but if you see this particular, so it is just a portion of the complete graph. So now if you see the complete picture, you will see that the number of claims is more or less constant, right? So they are not increasing. So if you see the age 15, 20, 25, 45, 50, 55, the age is increasing, but the number of claims is more or less constant. So we need to analyze the visualizations critically. We need to check out, okay, whether this is showing the complete picture or not, or whether it is just a portion. So if you see this particular graph, you can see with as the age increases, the number of claims decreases, right? So we should not be fooled, or we should not We should not misunderstand such kind of graphs. Okay. So now comes the for next topic of measuring data. How can you measure data? Okay, so let's see. So there are different levels of measurement. So one is a nominal data. Okay, nominal means there are predetermined categories. They can't be sorted, right? So examples are animal classification, mammal, fish, and reptile. So they cannot be. You cannot sort. There is no order, right? A mammal. So you cannot sort a cow and a crocodile and a bird. How can you sort them? Because they belong to different animal families, right? So this is called a nominal data. There are predetermined categories, right? So cow belongs to mammal, bird. A bird is also what? Bird is belongs to the bird category, and crocodile is a reptile. Okay. So there is a different predefined classification from biology or a political party, Republican, Democrat, or Independent, or like BJP, RJD, or Congress. So you cannot sort them, but they are already predefined, right? Next is the ordinal data. Ordinal is can be sorted, but it lacks a scale, right? So or can be sorted means like often, sometimes, seldom, or never, right? So how many times do you visit Jita gym? You say often, sometimes, seldom, or never. So you cannot, they can be sorted, but there is no particular scale, right? So it does not say like 7 days a week or 5 days a week or 2 days a week, but it says often. So often can be like 2 days a week, sometimes means like once a month, seldom means once in 6 year, never means you never go to the gym, right? But there is no scale, they can be sorted. Next is an interval. So it provides a scale. So interval means provides a scale, but it lacks a 0 point. So just like in the case of temperature, right? So temperature, you can measure temperature in centigrade, you can measure temperature in Fahrenheit, you can measure temperature in Kelvin, right? But there is no a 0 point. So you cannot absolutely say like this is a zero temperature. So like the 0 degree can be in centigrade, but Fahrenheit scale it is not zero, or in Kelvin scale it is not zero. So there is no standard 0 point. Okay. Or you can measure things based on ratio, right? The values have a true 0 point. So height, weight. So like I'm twice as high as my younger brother. Okay. Or my father weighs 20 like in so my father weighs as twice as my weight. Okay. So age, weight, salary, he earns 3 times more than me. So I can do all this measurement or a comparison. I can measure data using ratios. Next is population versus sample, right? So population is every member of a group. So suppose if you're talking about buying apples, then all the apples that are present on that particular shopkeeper, on that particular fruit shop, are my population. But only like those few 2 or 3 apples that I look at, that I check for the quality, are a part of the sample. So sample is a subset of the members that time and resources allow you to measure. Okay. So I cannot check all the apples in that particular fruit shop. So I can just take 2, 3, or 4 more apples and check their quality, check their shape, check their looks, check their color for freshness. So this is a sample, right? So population is every member of a group that we want to measure or that we want to study, or sample is just a small subset of the members at the time that the time and resources allow. This is important, that the time and resources allow. Right now, to study statistics and probability, we need to understand some of the mathematical symbols and expressions that are being used throughout, right? So this particular thing we are all aware, it is called squared. So x square means x multiplied by x twice. This is xi or x sub I. So it is a subscripted variable. The subscript x as a label. Suppose I'm talking about apple. So xi will be x1, x2, x10. So I bought 10 apples. So x will be x1, x2, x3 up to x10. So all of them xi's represent individual apple that I bought. Right. This is x factorial. X factorial, the expression looks like this. You start with the number, then you go multiply to the each subsequent number and go up to 1. This is x bar. X bar. It is a symbol for sample mean or the mean of the sample. Mu. Mu is a symbol for the population mean. This is called sigma. Sigma is syntax for writing sums, right? We will see that in the next slides, right? So suppose x to the power 5 means multiply x by x 5 times. If you see 3 to the power 4, that means 3 multiplied by 3 4 times. This we have seen in our school, like in our elementary schools. Right. Next is exponents. Suppose in a special case where the powers x raised to the power of minus 3. Minus means reciprocal. So you have to multiply 3 x by x 3 times and take the reciprocal. So 1 by 3. If the power is in negative, then you take do the multiplication in the denominator. If 2 raised to the power minus 3 means 1 upon 2 into 2 into 2, right? And also if the exponents are a fraction, then you have to take the nth root. So x to the power 1 by n means n times the root of x. So 8 to the power 1 by 3 means 3 times the root of 8, that is 2. Because this is the cube root of 8. So if you multiply 2 3 times, like 2 to the power 3 is 8, and then this is the inverse. So 2 to the power 3 is 8, right? And 8 to the power 1 by 3 is 2. This we should know, right? Now factorials. So this is what a general expression of factorial looks like. So x multiplied by x factorial is equal to x into x minus 1 into x minus 2 into up to 1, right? This is the general expression for dealing with factorials. Now for example, 6 factorial will be 6 into 5 into 4 into 3 into 2 into 1, that is 720. Now suppose you have 5 factorial divided by 3 factorial, you expand all of them and you do the division. Normally it's very simple, right? Now simple sums. So suppose now I want to write a sum of numbers from 1 to n. Then this is the short way of doing it. Like I can write this. So I have to sum, I have to take the sum of all the numbers from 1 to n. I can write them in a short form like this: summation of x. X belongs to x, starts from 1 go up to n. So this means x 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4. That means, so this symbol means you take a sum of this particular thing, and this thing x changes from 1 to n, right? So you first initially x is 1, then x is 2, then x is 3, then up to n, and you take an addition of all those terms, right? So suppose for this particular expression it says summation of x from x is equal to 1 to 4. So I will take 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4. Summation of x square, where x is equal to 1 and x 4. So I will take 1 square plus 2 square plus 3 square plus 4 square, because x goes from 1 to 4. Okay. Next is the series sum. So now suppose I am taking a sum of xi, where I goes from 1 to n. We are not changing the x, we are changing the I. So this means x1 plus x2 plus x3 up to xn, right? Suppose my x is a set of these numbers. This thing is called a set, collection of numbers. So my x is equal to 5, 3, 2, 8, right? So n is equal to number of elements in x. So there are 4 elements. So so n is equal to 4. Now if I do summation of xi, where I goes from 1 to 4, it will be like 5 first element, x1, then x2 is 3, x3 is 2, x4 is 8, right? So this is x1, x2, x3, x4. This we should know, right? Now we want to talk about what is the sample mean or average, okay, of a sample, right? Suppose you went to buy 1 kg of apples, right? So now all of my, so my complete, so in 1 kg of apple, if the apples are bigger, then I will have small number of apples. If the apples are small, I have more number of apples, but the weight remains same, right? That is because the sample, so if all of my apples are big, then I have less number of apples in my in 1 kg. Like if all of my apples are small, I have more number of apples. So it depends on what is the individual weight or what is the mean of the apples, right? So if you go to a fruit shop or if you go to a vegetable market, you see that there are all different kinds of apples. Some apples are big and shiny, some apples are small, right? So what is the average or what is the mean weight of an apple, right? So we can say that, okay, the each apple is almost 50 gram or 100 grams, right? So we want to take what is the sample mean. So the formula for calculating the sample mean is x bar is equal to summation of xi, where I will goes from 1 to n divided by n. Okay, this is how you can calculate. So if you want to find the mean of your apples, then you take, so you if you bought 1 kg of apples and you got 5 apples, you take the summation of all the apples, that the mass of all the apples, divided by number of the apples you bought. So like suppose 1 kg divided by 5. So the average weight of each apple is will be 200 grams, right? 1 kg is 1000 grams, divided by 5, that is 200 grams. So this is how to read this particular expression. So x bar, the symbol for the sample mean, like this is called x bar, is equal to the sum. This thing is called summation of all the sub xi values, sub xi in the series as I goes from 1 to the number n items in the series divided by n. Right? This is how you read. Now let's take some examples. So start with a series of values. Suppose I have set of values 7, 8, 9, 10. Right? I want to now because they are, we have to assign placeholder to each item. This is the first item, second item, third item, fourth item. Like this are the indexes of these particular items. Total item number of items are 4. So now this becomes x1, x2, etc. So x7 is x1, 8 is x2, x3 is 9, x4 is 10. Now I want to take the sum. I will apply all of these values in this particular formula. Okay, so plug these into the equations. X bar is equal to summation of xi. I goes from 1 to n. So x1 plus x2 plus x3 plus x4 plus xn by n. Now my n is 4, so I will go up to x4 and n is equal to 4. This is what my average is. So this is what my average is, 8.5. Right. Now what are the different types of measurements, measurement types and central tendencies? Okay, so what is the average return? Okay, or what is the average weight of apples? This is the measure of central tendency. Okay, if you talk about what is the average height of students in your class, what are the average marks of students in your class, it is called the central tendency. Okay, so because most of the class or most of the values tend to lie around that particular central value, that's why it is called a central tendency, right? How far from the average does individual value stray, right? So suppose this is called measures of dispersion, right? So suppose if I talk about the marks of students in your class, so like your marks, so if you talk so most of the marks will be between 60 to 80 in general, 60 to 80. So if there are like 50 students in your class, so around 30 of them will must have scored marks between 60 to 80, and like only 10 or less than that people must have scored more than that, between 90 and 10. And there are very few people who must have scored between like less than 50, less than 40, right? So this variation of marks of students is called dispersion, right? And the central tendency is sum of marks of all the students divided by number of students. So the central value lies between 60 to 80, but my marks are distributed between, they go as high as up to 100 and as low as up to like 30, 40, whatever the lowest marks student have scored. Okay, so so suppose in your pack of apples, you 1 kg of apples, you got 5 apples. Three of them are very big and two of them are very small, right? So the average weight, it will be around what, 200 grams, 100 grams, but for those two particular values the weight is going to be very less. Okay, so there is a dispersion, it is spread out. If your all the apples are of equal size and shape, then more or less all of them have the same mass. But if they are small and some of them are big, then the individual masses are different, right? Suppose all of the students in your class score around like 75 or between 60 to 70, then the dispersion of marks is less, your marks of the class are less spread out. But if in your class someone scored like between 90 to 100, then 10 people scored between 20 to 30, some people scored between 40 to 50, so there is a lot of dispersion. The marks are distributed all over but not focused at one point, one range. This is called dispersion. Okay, so there are three measures of central tendency: mean, median, and mode. Right. So they describe the location of the data. So mean, median, mode, all of them describe where my data is located. Okay. But they fail to describe the shape of the data. So they cannot describe how my data looks like. Okay. So mean is the calculated average, like summation of the values divided by number of values. Then median is the middle value, right? And mode is the most occurring value. These are the simple definitions, right? So suppose you talk about the mean. So for this blue data, the mean will be like summation of all these values divided by number of values, maybe something around here. So this is the mean of the value, right? You see that is, it goes up to here. So the dispersion is like it goes up to here in this direction and it goes up to here in this direction, right? And for this particular case, the orange values, the mean is 2.5, but like the dispersion is more. Like this is go up to here and it goes up to here. Talking about the, maybe I think you can talk about, take this example as apples. So these are the smaller apples, these are the bigger apples, and the weights, they are the weights, right? So you can, so the mean gives you the location. So the location is like my data is lying about this particular point. For this orange case, my data is lying about this particular point, this particular line. But how, what is the shape, how much it is spread out, it does not tell us. Mean does not tell about the shape of the data. Okay. So now median is the odd number of values. So median is the middle value, right? So let's take the case where the number of values are odd. Suppose these are the marks of the students out of 50. Okay, we arrange them in an increasing order, 9, 10, 13, 15 in an increasing order. Then the middle value is the median. Okay, so median means half of the values lie below 19 and half of the values lie above 19. So if you were to say that, then half of the class scored more than 19 and half of the class scored less than 19. Okay, this is the median value. Now if you have even number of students, then median is the average of the middle two values, because when you have even number, then in the center there will be two values, right? Suppose 4. So if you have 4 students, then who is the middle student? You cannot tell that. So you have to take the average of second and third. You have to arrange all the marks starting in an increasing order. Then you have to take the middle two values and average them to find the median. Here in our case, the median is 20. So half of the class scored less than 20 and half of the class scored more than 20. This is the median of the class. Right. Now, what is the difference between mean and median? So the mean can be influenced by outliers. Now, what are outliers? So outliers are the values which are lying farther from the mean value. Okay. So like the mean of the marks of the students is 60, right? But some of the students scored 99, 95. So they are lying very far from the mean value. So they are called outliers. Okay. So mean is influenced by outliers. But right, so like if you take the mean of 2 3 2 3 2 12 is 4, but the median is 2.5. So median is will be what, the middle value, 2 2 2 3. So 3 2 and 3 is 2.5. The median is much closer to the most of the values in the series. So mean is a value which takes into account all of the values and divide by the number of values, right? That's why it gets affected by the outliers. Right. So if you have, if you buy 1 kg apples, there are like four very big apples and one very small apple. Then if you find the average of the average weight of apples, then for big apples it is okay, but that smaller apple, your value will be wrong, right? Because it is a very small in shape, right? But if you take the median, then and the median value is very close to the actual number of values. So in this case, the mean value is 4, right? And the median value is 2.5. So in your class, if there are like more number of, if there are students who scored marks between 90, so like take an example where half of your class, 50% of the students scored marks between 90 and 100, and 50% of the students scored marks between what, 30 and 40. So your average of the class will be around 60. So you can say that, okay, yes, the class is really good at this. Every, like the average marks is 60%, but in actual, half of the class scored 30 marks between 30 and 40. So it is not a correct representation. But a median is going to be an actual value between actual value which is close to the real data observed. Okay, so median is 2.5. It is closer to the observed data. Here you can see the mean is 4, but there is no value which is closer to 4. Right? This is more closer. Right? So now mode is the most occurring value. So these are the marks of the student, same, right? So 16, 16, 16 appears 3 times. That means the mode is 3. So any value which is occurring highest number of times is called mode. Okay, highest occurrence. Suppose in your class 55, or like the marks between 60 to 65 are the highest, are the like occur most number of times, or many people have like many students have scored marks between 60 to 65, then you can say that the mode is between 60 to 65. Right? The measurement types. Dispersion, how to measure dispersion. To measure dispersion, we have these three values. range, variance, and standard deviation. Okay, so in this sample, so this is our sample, same the marks of students. The sample, the mean is 22.5. But how do we describe how spread out the sample is? So how can we say that what is the dispersion or how spread out the sample is? We have to use the range, variance, or standard deviation, right? So range is if you arrange all of the observations, these are called observations or data. If you arrange all the observations in an increasing order, you take the range is maximum minus minimum. So in this particular example, our range is 30. Okay, maximum minus maximum is 39, minimum is 9. We take the difference is 39. Okay, now let's take the variance. So calculated as the sum of square distances from each point to the mean. There is a difference between the sample variance and the population variance subject to Bessel correction. So it is the sum of square distances, right? So sum of square distances from each point to the mean. So like for every you find the mean, then you take the difference of the uh, observation with the mean. So you take any value minus the mean and take the square of the distance from each point to the mean. So there's a difference between sample variance and the population variance, right? So population variance means the variance of the complete population, and sample means like whatever the subset you are observing, the variance of that particular subset. Bessel's correction, we will see that for finding variance of a sample, we use n minus 1 instead of n. Okay. Sample variance is, as we denote this by s square, it is summation of x minus x bar whole square divided by n minus 1. Okay, and population variance is sigma square. This thing is called sigma, is equal to summation of x minus mu whole square divided by n. So here x stands for each value minus the mean of the value, take the square, sum it up for all the values and divide by n. This is called population variance. We will see this in example, right? Suppose this is our particular case. So these are the marks of students out of 15, right? Marks of students out of 15. I want to find what is the variance of this of the marks of students. So how can I do that? First, I will have to find the average. This is the mean or average. I will sum all the values, divide by number of values, 5. So the sample mean is 7.8. Now I find the variance. So how can I find the values? I will take the first value minus the mean, take the square. Second value minus the mean, take the squares. Plus the third value minus the mean, take the square. Plus the fourth value minus the mean and take the square. Like this, and I will do n minus 1 because it's a sample variance. So this is my sample variance. Okay, this is my how this gives me how my uh, data or my observation or the marks of students are dispersed or spread out. Okay. Okay, now next is the sample next is the standard deviation. Standard deviation is same. Standard deviation is just the square root of this particular value. Sample variance is s square, but the standard deviation is s. So we just take the square root of this particular value and we get the sample standard deviation. Square root of the variance, benefit same unit as the sample, meaningful to talk about, value lie within one standard deviation of the mean. So this the unit of this particular value is going to be s square. So we are talking about the marks of students. So the mean of marks is normal, right? We talk about the mean of marks are sample mean. So 7.8 marks. But when we talk about s square, see all of the units, all of the individual values are getting squared. So this the unit of sample variance is squared. So if these are the ages, then it is 6.7 year square. If these are marks, then it is 6.7 marks square. So it is not easy to understand. So the positive thing about standard deviation is it is meaningful to talk about. Okay, because the units are same as the observed data. So for the same example, this is my sample, this is my mean, sample mean, right? And this is my sample standard deviation because I take the square root of all the values or just take the square root of 6.7. Sample standard deviation. So I can say that the standard deviation of my sample is 2.59. Okay, or my sample is the marks. So The standard deviation of the marks of the students are 2.59. Or if you want to talk about the population standard deviation, then population standard deviation is same, but instead of doing n minus 1 here, 5, instead of dividing by 4 minus 1, 5 minus 1, I divide by 4, 5, right? Because this is the only difference. Next is measurement type is quartiles. Okay, we will see what quartiles are. Another way to describe data is through quartiles and the interquartile range. Okay, it has the advantage that every data point is considered not aggregated. Okay, so it is quartiles means dividing your data into four parts, right? You have a complete data, you arrange them in a particular order, and you divide them into four parts. Like, this is how we divide. Suppose these are the marks of the students. Same example. There are 20 values, and we divide them into four parts. Like this is the central value. Now we divide this particular half into two parts, right? For four equal parts, we divide them, right? So this is first part is called the first quartile, the second quartile, the third quartile, and this is the fourth quartile or the complete value, right? Like 25%. Next, up to here is 50%. Up to here is 75%. This is a whole 100%. So we divide our data into four parts, 25% each, in an increasing order, right? So divide the series, divide each sub series. These become quartiles, right? So this is my complete series. First I divide into two part by this. So one part is on the left, one part is on the right. Then I divide both the left part into halves and the right part into two halves. This is called interquartile. It is called quartile. Okay. So now my first quartile is, this is my first quartile. It is the mean of these two values, right? So it is the mean of these two values is the first quartile. Second quartile is the mean of these two values. And third quartile is the mean of these two values because I have even number of points. Otherwise, there will be a central value. So like there are like 3 to 5 and 3 to 5, 10, because there are 10 individuals up to here. That's why the central value is the going to be the mean of these two values. Okay. Now let's plot the quartiles. So in our data visualization part, we have seen the box plot. So this is also a box plot. This looks like this. So on the starting and the end points are the minimum and the maximum values. Inside this box are the first quartile, median, and the third quartile. Okay. So quartile ranges are seldom the same size. So the ranges are not actually not cannot like not always the same size. So this is the first quartile. So this particular 9 to 13 lies over here. This is the part where 9 to 13 lies. So this particular part up to here is this one. Okay. And this particular part, the second quartile is this one. This particular part is this one, and this particular part is 34, 36. See, this point is 36, 36 to 60 is this one. Okay, so this is how my data is divided. So we can see that the median is this. So like half of my values are this side and half of my values are this side. This is my median. Okay, and this is the first quartile, second quartile. This is how I can see the spread of my data. So you can see that half of the values lie between 9 to 22 and half of the values lie between 22 to 60, right? So there is very much disparity. There is a difference. There is a, so let me just remove all of this. You can see that these are the half of the values. They lie very close to each other. And these are the other half. They are very well, they are separated. They lie at a distance. Okay, there are very much space between these values, right? Now, fences and outliers. So, what is considered an outlier? A common practice is to set a fence that is 1.5 times the width of the IQR, interquartile range. Anything outside the fence is an outlier. This is determined by the data, not an arbitrary percentage. So here we talk about what is an outlier and how to find an outlier. So just like in our garden, we set a fence or we set up a wire boundary, like whatever is outside this boundary, we call it as an outlier. Okay, and whatever inside is a part of the garden or part of the house, right? So here also we set up a fence using IQR, which is the interquartile range. So this thing is called the interquartile range. That is quartile 3 minus quartile 1 is one interquartile range. So 1.5 times from the quartile, from the third quartile is the outer fence, right? So like this is 1.5 times the IQR. Okay, and this is my IQR, Q3 minus Q1. Right, so any values which is lying outside this is an outlier. Any value which is lying here is an outlier. Any value which is lying inside this is a part of my data set, is not an outlier. Right, here 70, here 70 is lying. Suppose in the previous example 60 is a part of IQR. It is lying here inside my fence, right? But if I replace the last value by 70, it becomes an outlier. So here I replace the last value by 70, it became an outlier because my fence is here. So this is my boundary. This is my boundary, and anything which lies outside this becomes a outlier. And has to be the maximum value. Previously the maximum value was at 60 something here, right? So it was a part, but I replaced 60 by 70, so it became a outlier. And now the next highest value is 47. So like this my box plot will show the maximum value, will stop at the maximum value inside the fence. Okay, when drawing box plots, the whiskers are brought inwards to the outermost values inside the fence. Outermost value inside the fence. That's why it is not going up to 70, it is stopping at 47, which is the outermost value inside the fence. Now, so until now, we're talking about only just one single variable data or monovariate data, right? There is only like one scale. Now we'll be talking about bivariate data or two variables together, right? Bivariate data compares two variables. By convention, the x-axis is set to the independent variable and the y-axis is set to the dependent variable, or that which can be measured related to x. So we are talking about two variables now. Suppose I want to measure the height and weight, the relation of height and weight. So one is going to be my dependent variable and the other one is going to be the independent variable, right? So y-axis is what is dependent and independent variable. So anything which I want to study becomes my dependent variable, and anything which I want, which I am taking as a cause. Okay, so if you are tall, your weight is going to be more. Like this is something I understood. So I want to study the weight of students, right? So my whatever I want to study becomes my dependent variable because I am considering that weight of students depend on the height. Okay, so height is independent because this is how I am considering the height of students is independent. It does not depend on anything, but my weight, I am reading, I want to study the weight of students as a relation to the height. I want to study how height of a student affects the weight of student. Okay, so here I'm treating weight as a dependent variable, and I am assuming the weight of a student to depend upon the height of the student. Okay, so my x-axis will be the independent variable, that is the height, and my y variable is going to be the dependent variable, that is the, so I want to, this is like height, x-axis is height, and y-axis is going to be weight. Okay, this is, I want to study what is the height and weight of students. Okay. Excuse me. So scatter plots may uncover a correlation between the two variables. They cannot show causality. Okay, so correlation, if there is a relation between two variables. So scatter plots are plotting the data with just single points. Okay, so they help us to uncover correlation. Like correlation means if there is a relation between height and weight. If there is a relation between two variables, we call it a correlation. And they cannot show causality because causality, that means they do not explain, okay, what is the reason for this particular correlation, right? So correlation, so suppose this is please observe this data. This data is about the black line shows that so on the x-axis I have years, on the y-axis I have the amount of cheese consumed and the number of deaths on this. So the black curve shows the number of people or number of deaths by entangling in their bed sheets. Okay, so this black curve shows the number of deaths each year by getting entangled or entangled in their bed sheets, and the red color shows the number of or the amount of cheese consumed each year. Okay, so as we can see, both of these values or both of these plots increase as we increase the year. So we cannot say that they both are related. We cannot say that people who eat more cheese they die by getting entangled in their bed sheet. Okay, so we see that they are both related. The trend is same. Both of them are increasing as we increase the number of years, but there is no connection. There is no reason in which like these two can be connected. So okay, correlation between any two variables doesn't prove causality, right? Causality means like the reason behind. So if two things are related, if things have correlation, that doesn't mean there is a cause or there is a reason behind this, right? They can be uh, correlated without any reason to, right? More statistical analysis needs to be done to determine causality. Okay, for example, does increasing number of police officers decrease crime, right? So if we increase more if we increase the number of policemen working in an area, is it necessary that the crime will decrease? Okay, we would look at the correlation and do further analysis to understand the causality. So we always have to do some further analysis. So if we observe anything, if we see a correlation by the graph, that does not explain the reason for it, so we have to do further analysis. Okay, so suppose there is a, so like positive correlation looks like this. So this is like x-axis, this is the y-axis. So this is like my height and this is the weight, right? So this is my height, and this is my weight. So I see that the as the height is increasing, the weight is also increasing. So there is a positive correlation, right? And we also have something called negative or inverse correlation, where one value increases, the other value decreases. Okay, so it is decreasing, right? So as my height is increasing, my weight is decreasing. So if I see this kind of a trend, that means there is some other problem that needs to be because this is the general trend. If we talk about students and height and weight, then if the height increases, then your weight also increases. But for some reason, if I get a graph like this, where if the height is increasing and the weight of the student is decreasing, then maybe these students or that particular class is suffering from a disease. Okay, and then we may have to further investigate. Now covariance. So a common way to compare two variables is to compare their variances, right? So like for single variable, we had variance or the spread out of the data or the spread of the data. For two variables or a bivariate distribution, we have covariance. How two variables are distributed or how they are spread out with respect to each other. Okay, a common way to compare two variables is to compare their variances. How far from each item's mean do typical values fall? Okay, the first challenge is to to match scale. Comparing height to in inches to weight in pounds isn't meaningful unless we develop a standard score to normalize the data. Okay, so to compare two variables together, we need to match the scale as it is written over here. We cannot compare the height of students in inches to the weights in pounds, or we cannot compare the heights in centimeter and the weights in kgs, because all of them are numbers. The scale has to match. So we use something called standard score to normalize the scale. Okay, for simplicity, we will consider the population covariance. This is the formula for population covariance. This is how we can find the covariance of x and y. COV, variance for one, covariance for two. So that the variance was x minus x bar to the whole square. Here we are doing x minus x bar multiplied by y minus y bar, and take the summation of all these values and divide by the total number of values n. Okay, so there are like suppose two values x and y, two tables. So one data set is here, two variables x and y, one data set is here x and y. So let's find the plot them. Let's plot. So like these blue ones looks like this. If I do a scatter plot, this thing is called a scatter plot, and the orange one looks like this when I do a scatter plot. Okay, the values are distributed. So like just by looking at the graph, we can say that the blue values are more closer to each other as compared to the orange values, and I can see a trend over here, like it is increasing as the x, as we go towards, as we go to the right, the values are increasing. So there is a trend over here, but there is no trend as we go right, go down, but it increases also. So we cannot actually say that what is the trend. Okay, so let's go ahead and find the mean value. So x bar is like summation of all the x values divided by number of values. Y bar is summation of all the y values divided by the total number of values. Similarly, for the orange data set, we find the x bar summation of all the values divided by number of values. The y bar is summation of all the values divided by the number of values. Next, we find x minus x bar and y minus y bar. So x minus x bar is x minus x bar is what, 3.5, y bar is 6.5. Right, so we find both of these things. Like in the previous plot, if you find, like the mean is same, x bar is 3.5 here, x bar is 3.5 here, and y bar is 6.5 here, y bar is 6.5 here. So mean is same for both of the data set, right? But the graph looks different. So for both of these data points, the mean is same for x and y, but the y values are different, but the variance is going to be different. So x minus x bar is this table, y minus y bar is this. Now we need to find the sum, right? So if we take the product x minus x bar, y minus y bar, right? So if we take the product, now we need to sum them. So if we sum them, it is 15.5, it is minus 0.5, right? Now if I find the covariance 15.5 by 6 for the blue data set, the covariance value is 2.583, and the covariance values for the orange data set is minus 0.083. So we see that the covariance between x and y is very high for the blue data set, but the covariance between the x and y variable is very less or almost zero in the orange data set. And this is also, this is something we also derived by looking at the graph. Here the covariance is more, so we see the relation because they are, both are increasing. If you increase your x, the y is also increasing. There is a trend, they look related to each other. Then there is no trend in this particular data. In the orange data set, the covariance that we found out mathematically is very less, is almost zero, and there is no connection between the values of x and y. We don't see a trend, they are like spread out randomly. There is no trend. If we increase x, the y is not necessarily increasing. Okay, so this is the importance of covariances. There is something called Pearson's covariation coefficient, which gives us a specific number to work with, right? So Pearson's correlation coefficient, in order to normalize the values from two different distributions we use. So if we are using, if my x and y variables have a difference in scale, we use a Pearson's correlation coefficient. Okay, so the formula looks like this: covariance of x and y divided by standard deviation of x multiplied by standard deviation of y. So all of this we have seen. So covariance we just saw just now. Standard deviation we have seen in the previous slides. So when we use this, it looks like, so the final formula becomes this: summation of x minus x bar multiplied by y minus y bar divided by summation of x minus x bar square multiplied by under root of summation of x minus y bar whole square. Okay, so rho, this is called Greek letter rho. This is called sigma and x bar and covariance. Okay, so the Pearson correlation coefficient, the values fall between +1 and -1. So unlike the covariance values, which may fall, which can be anything, here the Pearson correlation coefficient falls between +1 and -1. Okay, +1 means total positive linear correlation. 0 means no linear correlation, and -1 means total negative linear correlation, right? So if my data looks like this, there is a high correlation of 1. If like it is positive but spread out, it is like 0.8. So this is these pictures or graphs show you different kind of correlations. If my data is distributed in this particular way, the correlation is 0, or if it is, there is a negative trend, I get a picture like this. Okay, and if my data is like this, like same, very much close to each other, then I get a correlation like 1 or -1, because it is highly correlated. But in all these cases, all these patterns, there is no correlation, so I get a correlation of 0. Okay, Pearson's correlation coefficient of 0, right? Suppose, let's take an example. A company decides to test the sales of a new product in 5 separate markets to determine the best price point. They set a different price in each market and record sales volume over the same 30-day period. Okay, so to determine what is the best selling price for a product should be a company uh, uh, kept the selling price in five different markets different. Okay, so suppose a company is selling a mobile phone, and so in one market it is selling at 10,000, in another market it is selling at 12,000, in the third market it is selling at 8,000. So to decide what is the best price for a mobile phone is going to be, or any product is going to be, the company kept separate selling prices of that product in separate five separate markets. Okay, and it recorded the sales of the mobile phone, or that particular product for 30 days. Okay, so these are the results, right? So basically, the where the price was 10 US dollars, 11 US dollars, 15 US dollars, 19 and 22, and this is the number of units sold in thousand. So we see that where the price is highest, the sale is lowest. Where the right, so this is the highest price. So on the x-axis we have price, on the y-axis we have units sold. So my unit sold is the dependent variable, and the price is the independent variable, which I am setting with the which the company is fixing these prices, but the unit sold are the outcome of the prices that are being fixed. Okay, so when we plot this, we can see that there is a negative trend, because as the price is increasing, the units sold are decreasing. So we have to like take into account different price and sell unit sold combinations. Okay, so there appears to be a strong correlation, but how strong? So we have to find out. So we have recall the simplified correlation formula, which is the Pearson's correlation coefficient. If we find out all of these values, we put them in the formula, and we come out with a particular value of correlation. Okay, so x bar is this, y bar is this. Then we want to calculate x minus x bar and y minus y bar. It is this. Then we take the product. This is x minus x bar, y minus y bar. This is the product of x minus x bar with y minus y bar. And finally, we want to take the squares, x minus x bar square, y minus y bar whole square. Right. Now let's take the sum, because in this formula there is sum. So this we take the sum. This is the sum of x minus x bar square, y minus y bar square. Then we take the root, plug these values in the original formula. Right. So we plug all these values, and finally we get there is a negative correlation of minus 0.948, which is like almost equal to 1. Right, minus 1. So there is a negative correlation, linear correlation. That means my values are related. Right. So rho xy, or the Pearson's correlation coefficient is minus 0.948, shows a very strong negative correlation. Okay. So next topic is going to be probability. This is it for today's lecture, and thanks a lot for your time. I'll see you in the next lecture.